I would like to thank everybody for coming out to Mike's funeral. We got Emily Burston. She's going to read his obituary. And then we got Maylee Burston, my granddaughter's going to play a musical number. And then Ben Egbert, he's going to dedicate the grave.
Michael Bushill Whiting was 70 years old, passed away January 21st, 2022, following a long battle with cancer. Mike was born on October 26, 1951, to Max Boyack and Doreen Rochelle Whiting. Mike was one of 3 children. Mike graduated from Orem High. He went to UVCC and graduated in graphic arts. He went on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints to Oakland, California. Mike spent most of his life collecting antiques, which included owning several antique stores. He loved the antiques and enjoyed all friends he met in the business. He spent many hours decorating his house and yard. Gardening was another one of his many hobbies. He was such a talented artist in all that he did. He made many original needlework, samplers, and various other pieces of art. He had many admirers of amazing talents. He spent many years with his best friend Steve, enjoying life. He is survived by his brother Ron, Becky Whiting, and many nieces and nephews. Mike is preceded in death by his father, Max B. Whiting, mother Doreen B. Whiting, and sister Linda L. Allen. A special thanks for always being there for Mike, Steve, and Susan. Thank you. Also, the violin Maylee is playing is an antique of Mike's that we had restored, and by a miracle got it back last night. So she's going to play.
Thank you. That was beautiful. If there's anybody else that would like to say a few words, now is your opportunity.
It's double space, so it won't take too long. My name is Mary Guerra, and I'm a friend of Mike's. I first met Mike when he was a vendor at Treasure's Antique Mall years ago. But it wasn't until last summer that we got to really know each other, and I discovered how talented Mike was. Mike could do anything. He loved to cook. He loved working in the garden. He even created a secret garden in the backyard. He was a craftsman, a decorator, and the list goes on. Although Mike was ill with cancer, when I'd visit him, he was always working on a project, or he'd be using his cane to keep his balance as he made chocolate chip cookies for his neighbors, or making Christmas ornaments as people passed by to say hello. Whatever Mike was working on, he did with his heart and soul, and he enjoyed seeing people light up when they received something he made for them. On the day Mike died, the plan was for his best friend Susan to come over so that he could show her where he'd like to have tulips put in the garden, because he always liked seeing them cover the backyard. Sadly, that was not meant to be. To Mike's partner of 40 years, I know Mike would have wanted to say thank you for so many things you've done, especially when he was sick. For the love and the care you showed him, trying different meals to see if he could hold it down, getting him dressed in the mornings and driving him to the stores, being there when Mike needed help walking or getting out of a chair. You were there every step of the way. And you gave him the precious gift of a chance to have the best quality of life possible to the very end. And no one could have loved him more. And finally, on a personal note, to Mike. Okay, I know you're here in spirit, and I know about the clocks going off at the same time. I also know about the lights coming on when they shouldn't be, and I know about the room being full of cinnamon. We miss you, Mike, and we thank you for so many memories you've given us.
Thank you. Anybody else?
It was a joyous and wonderful day when Steve and Mike moved into our neighborhood. They loved the house, and so that house looks loved. And they loved their neighbors, and we all feel loved. Mike liked antiques, therefore he liked me. And several of the neighbors. It has been a wonderful, wonderful time in our neighborhood with them. We have just enjoyed their personalities, the yard sales, the highs, the everything that has been with them. I'm sorry for those of you who don't live in our neighborhood, because it's wonderful. And I just want to say that, Steve, please don't leave, because I can tell you that the neighborhood will wrap their arms around you and continue to love you.
Thank you.
I hope I can talk. I'm Susan, and 28 years ago,
my family moved to Orem, and the first thing I did is I looked in the phone book for antique stores. And so I went to all of them, and that's when I met Mike. And he was like a kindred spirit to me. I loved Mike from the very beginning. And over the years, our friendship grew, and I enjoyed so much about Mike. And then when he got cancer, I was at a time in my life when I had extra time, so I was so lucky I got to help him. It meant the world to me, and during this whole time, I saw so much love in action. People were so kind and would reach out and do such sweet things for him. I think at the first time we went to the University of Utah, and he had to get a feeding tube and a PICC line. And I don't know if you know this, but he was kind of feisty. Stephen always said you can always tell a whiting, but you can't tell a whiting much. Is that it? And I thought, that's something Mike and I have in common. But so we went to the hospital, and they put us in a room, and we were there like 15 hours. And he kind of wanted to smoke, you know. And so then he had an IV and everything, and he goes, if they don't get me in a room right now, I'm taking this IV out and going home. And he started to take his IV out, but I go, no, let's walk around the parking lot and maybe we'll find a cigarette. But I just was so desperate for him to stay. And then by the time we got back in, they had found him a room, and he got his feeding tube and got started on that. And then in October, he fell quite a bit because he was so weak and dizzy. And he fell one morning and split his head open, and Stephen called the paramedics. But Mike wouldn't go to the hospital. He hated going to the hospital. But that night I went over, and his head was still bleeding. And I said, Mike, you're going to the hospital. That's all there is to it. And he said, no, I'm not. I go, no, you really are. And then I took a picture of him, and I showed him how bad he looked. And I said, you're going to die if you don't go. And finally we convinced him to go. And when we got there, he was so mad at Stephen and I. He said, I'm going to shoot you both in the back of the head. And he kind of meant it, I think. But we got in there, and he got 12 staples in his head, and he had pneumonia and COVID, and he was septic, and he was just in such a bad place. And that night, as we were talking to him, all of a sudden, he got really excited. And I go, what's going on? He goes, don't you see it? Do you see my dad? I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, my dad's right over there. He's standing there. And he looks so happy. But then his dad was quickly gone. And I thought for sure he was going to go that night. He didn't want to go, and no one wanted him to go. And I don't know, he just kept, you know, creating and doing things that he loved, and that kept him motivated. And one of the most tender things I think that happened, well, the week when he died, I had this feeling to go over that morning and spend the day with him. And I kind of didn't want to, because I thought, I've got a lot to do, but I'm just so grateful I followed that feeling. And then when Stephen called me and told me he died, I couldn't believe it. I love Mike so much. But the sweetest thing Stephen told me that when Mike woke up that morning, Stephen, of course, every morning got him up, bathed him, got him dressed, got his breakfast, and got him comfortable before he went to work. And Mike opened his eyes and he goes, I am so happy to see you, Stephen. And I think he was just saying, I love you, and I'm so grateful for everything that you did for me. I admire Stephen so much, and the tenderness and kindness and compassion and long-suffering that he showed. And another thing is they do live in the greatest neighborhood, because when Mike came home from the hospital after having COVID pneumonia, I went around to the neighbors and asked them if they could please come over every once in a while and just walk in and see if he was standing or sitting, because he fell so much. And everyone stepped up. They do live in a great neighborhood. I think the greatest thing I've learned for this is family and relationships are everything. And there are so many beautiful people in this world, and I saw love in action all the time. And I love Mike. I'm gonna miss him.
Thank you.
I love you, Steve. And we loved Mike. Steve and Mike moved right into the house next door to us 22 years ago and became instant friends. And they became friends and brothers and pseudo uncles to my kids and rescuers to my kids and my dogs who were escape artists and ended up in their backyard. I can't even begin to count how many times they found stray kids and stray dogs and returned them home. And Steve constantly says that we are his village, but you and Mike are our village. And Mike, as y'all know, loved antiques. And he loved to go to DI. And he would come over and show me his finds. He was always so excited to show off his newest treasure that he had found. And he knew things that I collected, and he would sometimes buy something for me just because he knew that I liked it. And he expected nothing in return. And I was always so amazed that he even remembered what it was that I liked and would think of me just out of the blue. If we had a question about plants, we knew we could go to him and ask him. When he started to get sick, Steve would leave the doors open and we'd just go over, knock on the door, open it and yell, "Hey Mike, I'm coming in." And what I thought would be a 10 or 15 minute checkup would end up being a 2 or 3 hour visit. He never wanted us to leave. Until finally we said, well, I've got to go do this or that. And he'd like, okay, well, we'll see you tomorrow. and we would. But it was never a burden. You did never feel like, oh gosh, I'm sitting here forever. The time flew by. We're really going to miss Mike. He brought so much life and joy and pleasure to our little neighborhood. But he leaves so much life and joy and pleasure behind. And Steve, you have a village, and you are part of that village. And you will have it forever. We love you.
Thank you. Speaking to the COVID moment. Mike and Steve lived in a house that I worked on for 20 years and loved. And I loved that they lived there and liked it. As far as I know, they never had to fix any of the wiring I fixed. I think sometimes we're known by our stuff. And I was proud of that and proud that Mike liked it. And I've been dragged off the street many times, Mike saying, "Hey, look at this." And it was good. But he was a pleasure to know. And my kids look at that house and say, yeah, they've done good things to it. But fundamentally, the bones are still there. And I'm glad that the Mike was part of our neighborhood
Nicky Purcell died a couple of whiles ago, and he and Mike, I think, were pretty good friends because they worked together and they did these plant things, you know. But it was a pleasure to know him, and they were good to have in the neighborhood. I think part of the neighborhood forgets that the neighborhood was a bigger neighborhood back a while ago, and then they gerrymandered it, you know that word. But we still feel like you're part of us, and thanks for living, and thanks for the music. I played that song on my accordion at my mom's funeral, and wasn't very good, but it was my song for my mom. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Alexandra. I'm from the Provo Home Depot. Mike and I first became friends when he got really mad when his back was broken. I think he stomped out of my office, mad that he had to fill out some paperwork. And then he came back a couple hours later and apologized and asked what he needed to do. And that's when we started talking about antiques, and I really wanted to get to know him because I thought, you are a feisty old man. And sure enough, he was, but he and I became good friends. He was such a generous person. I remember saying that I wanted to see his house at Christmas time, and when I went, he gave me the tour and had a beautiful stocking that he had, I think he had done the design and then had it commissioned out or had it done, but he had a beautiful stocking. And in the stocking was rosemary and cotton and just beautiful berries. And every year I take it out and put it inside my Santa Claus and I think of him. The next time I went the next year, I said, oh my gosh, your tree is so beautiful. And he had this beautiful white Santa Claus hanging there. And he says, take it, it's yours, you can just have it. And I thought, I don't want to take this. And he says, oh, I know you love this stuff, go ahead and take it. I bought a crow from him, his wooden famous crow. Do any of you know about the crow? I have that crow. I'm so grateful that I bought that from him. I remember coming to work and saying I couldn't find the birch pieces to put in my yard. I have an old house. I live in a 1916 Craftsman, so I love antiques as well. The next day he came and he says, come to my car, and he brought me all these sticks to put in my flowers. And the best part was one day I said, I'm looking for white skates to put on my old antique sled. And the next day, maybe a couple days later, there he was with antique ice skates that had cotton and berries in them, and they hang on my sled every year. Mike was awesome. He was so fun. He was so creative. He was ornery. Customers would search for him in the garden department because he knew so much about plants. He was our door greeter for a little while when he started getting weaker, but he was awesome. We just love him. He made us laugh. He made us smile. He was just a hoot to have. So thank you for letting me share that. We're lucky to have known him at the Home Depot.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that we love you and we're going to miss you. Continue on with your journey.
Our dear Heavenly Father, by the power of the Holy Melchizedek priesthood, which I hold, I dedicate and consecrate this burial plot as the resting place for the body of Michael Bushel Whiting. I bless this place will be hallowed and protected until the resurrection. Please bless the family, that they will be comforted at this time, and that they will be able to have each other to comfort and be able to do service to each other and be able to show their love that way. And please bless that they'll be able to have their neighbors and their community show how much they love and support Steve. And please bless Steve at this time, that he'll be able to feel everyone's love and care for him and for Mike, and bless that he'll be able to fill Mike with us today, and that he'll fill him throughout the rest of his life. And bless that all the family members will be able to have their health and be able to live long lives and be able to live on with Mike's legacy of loving and appreciating the older things in life and being able to pass that on to the next generation. And we ask these things and say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I want everybody to not forget the luncheon that's at the church, 195 South, 100 East. And everybody here is welcome to come to the luncheon. Thanks for your coming out.